What happens in the sky affects life down here on Earth. The celestial compass shows you how and guides your way with astrology you can use from professional astrologer Kathy Biehl. Every episode features her light-hearted, practical forecasts and navigational tips, blended with humor, optimism, and a love of patterns, symbolism, and pop culture references. Kathy translates technicalities into concepts that apply to real life. You'll learn how the current moment ties to where we've been, from the recent past to cycles that last happened years ago, and get a look at where we're heading. And much more, from special topics to special guests. The Celestial Compass, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering. Here's your host, Kathy Biehl.
Greetings, Earthlings. Welcome to yet another fun-filled entertainment of Celestial Compass with Kathy Biehl and her ongoing Mercury retrograde persistent issues, technology gods. I apparently have not yet made enough sacrifices. I actually even bought a statue of Mercury and gave it to a Taurus friend of mine who has an altar that she keeps for me. But still, we have surprises, which actually fits the week. Let me update the forecast briefly before I bring our guest in. Although we will look at this as the dog days of summer, and there are those who will tell you about something called Lion's Gate, which you may or may not put any credence into. What you can put credence into is that we have heavy Venus action going on for the rest of the month. Venus, the goddess of everything we value, beauty, money, creativity, each other, our own selves, self-expression in Leo. She's in the look at me sign of Leo. She's retrograde, and this week she's halfway through her retrograde journey and makes two really important contacts. She collides with the quick change artist of the zodiac, Uranus, on the 9th, and anything can happen between coming off of that, surprises, being jolted out of situations, sudden turnarounds, just wait and see. Over the weekend, she merges with the sun in what promises to be a really, really lovely assimilation of where we've been in the Venus retrograde journey. Perhaps you have rediscovered old parts of yourself, people from the past, projects, passions, just felt more comfortable with expressing who you really are and less comfortable with playing a game that somebody else has laid out in front of you. As the month goes on, we will feel more and more of a retrospective feel at the end of the month, or actually starting on the 23rd, we'll have dual inner planet retrogrades. Mercury, the planet that rules what goes in and out of our mouths and minds, and also how we get around, goes retrograde, and those two continue together for a few weeks. So for now, just notice all of the self-expression, passion, creativity, pleasure, enjoying life, opportunities and situations arise around you. And if this weekend you do whatever you feel like, no matter what obligations you have, you will be living out your cosmic imperative. So with that, we're switching. We have a very, very interesting topic today. My guest is Peter Doughty, who writes a weather astrology column for The Mountain Astrologer, which many of you likely subscribe to. Peter is at astrology after a long and winding road took him with a bookstore browse in New York's Grand Central Station. And after his first Saturn return, he saw his first writings published in the mundane astrology realm, including regular contributions to Welcome to Planet Earth magazine, which some of us will admit to being old enough to remember. Meandering into and through the early phases of internet publishing, he experimented with astro-historical timelines and a blog as the term began circulating. Being up to today, he has taken his training in geography and combined that with his love of understanding how things that play out on the earth go along with what is happening in the sky, and that has led to astrological weather forecasting. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how you came to astrology? Because this sounds like it's got the potential to be a very interesting story.
Well, I figure it always is. Well, let's see. Yeah, in my case, I took a little bit of a longer than usual and winding road between senior year in college and actually graduating. Maybe like a lot of other people, I stumbled on a statistics course. Anyway, when I got around to going back and finishing coursework and graduating, immediately I just found myself gravitated to anything I could find about astrology. And I'm old enough to be able to say, well, there really wasn't very much publicly visible about astrology back in those days. But anyway, within a few months, I decided, not exactly consciously, but anyway, I decided that astrology was it for me. That was the thing that I was most of anything drawn to. And that happened to be when Saturn was on my sun transiting and Uranus was squaring my sun transiting.
An awakening.
A big awakening and a big commitment. And I've been at it ever since. And I tried to, during a period of a lot of distress, I tried to dump astrology out of my life, and it didn't work. I more or less stayed away for a few years. And toward the end of that time was when my daughter was born. And about the only astrology I did around that time was look ahead a little bit and figure out when I thought my daughter was going to be born, what day. And I was actually right.
Okay, so you have a long track record of actually looking at events and things that happen in physical reality. I mean, some people, explore the soul or they look for psychological, but you're very focused on this happened and I can correlate it to this event.
Yeah, and I also do, whenever I can, personal consulting. I really enjoy doing that, especially in the past, how long has it been now? Since around 2010, I think it was, when I started to look into the Hellenistic stuff. And I remember taking a workshop one weekend with a lot of other local astrologers with Chris Brennan. And that was pretty much the first time I'd really had exposure to the Hellenistic system. And that really opened up my perception about natal and transit and every other kind of personal astrology. It was just incredibly eye-opening. Actually, and around soon after I got into the Hellenistic stuff, I started a big project at my house, not the house where I am now, but anyway, when a big elm tree had to come down, and it was so strange looking that I didn't even recognize it as an elm tree. It was time anyway with that elm tree gone, to transform the yard, front and back. So I dug a rain garden in the front, and I put in fruit trees in the back, and perennials, and elderberries, and hops, a cherry tree. So that gardening experience which was getting back in a really intensive and a different way to what I observed my dad doing when I was a kid. So this was anyway, it was a real immersion in the whole gardening world. And that fits in very nicely with weather, because it helps to know, is the season going to be dry? Am I going to need to, for example, use my water barrel water more stringently, or can I be more generous with it? So that's just one more way that I've used astrology over the years.
So let's look at weather forecasting for a moment. How did you gravitate toward that? Because I've only known of one other person who used this.
It's not very common. In fact, for a long time, many decades, there was almost nothing in print about weather astrology. But anyway, well, I was getting more interested in weather astrology because of my gardening, as I said. And I'd also noted back then when I was living in Minnesota with those really severe winters, at least they used to be, I got more interested in tracking the weather astrologically. So that was around the time that I read about what David Roll was doing. And he had a bookstore. I never met the guy, never got to his bookstore in Maryland, but he was putting a number of out-of-print astrology books back into print.
That's true. I remember this.
Yep, and one of them, which he put out in the spring of 2012, just before I went to the United Astrology Conference, aka UAC, in New Orleans that year. I took along this freshly printed copy of the title being A Textbook of Long-Range Weather Forecasting by George J. McCormick. This book almost died, I guess I would say. He started studying weather astrology in the 1920s. And by the 1940s, he was putting together forecasts and contacting newspapers to see if they would publish his forecast or at least put it on file for future reference. And in 1947, having had students by, I think, exclusively mail order, he put together this textbook. And how many, I looked this up just a while ago. Let me see if I can find, okay, I remember now, it was 59 pages typed on a typewriter. 59 hand-typed, single-spaced, one-sided letter-sized pages bound in a 3-ring binder. So 59 copies. That's it. And he distributed those to his students. And then, the years and the decades went by, and McCormick himself was pretty much forgotten, but I suppose some astrologers knew about him, and one of them was David Roll, and he got his hands on a copy from someone in Sweden and put it back into print. But otherwise, that book might have died forever. So anyway, that was my first real immersion into weather astrology, and I still refer to it sometimes. It's been, 13 years? There's a lot of rather technical weather language because he was trying to get the Weather Bureau to give him a hearing. And actually, he did get a hearing. He got a hearing with the Weather Bureau and what was the other one? The Association of American Meteorologists. So he made presentations to these groups. And basically, as you probably might expect, met with stony silence. Didn't want to touch it with any 10-foot pole. So, and after that, as far as I can tell, he personally faded into obscurity. He was born in 1887.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
So,
Sun conjunct Mars in Taurus, opposite Jupiter in Scorpio, Sagittarius rising, and there's that Jupiter in Scorpio. Sign of research.
right. So
Sign of digging.
You have taken up the mantle, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the methodology that you use. My brief exposure to your forecasts is that you take an ingress on a cardinal sign ingress and look at what might be happening for a season and cast it for a specific location.
Right. Yeah, and just to clarify, there have been others who have been in frankly more in the public eye than I have about astrometeorology, and Chris Brandt Risk is one of them. Her book was published in '97. I think it was. Do I have it right here? Yeah, it was put out by AFA. And I also became a little aware of Carolyn Egan, and I think she was putting out her observations probably in print and also in the early years of the internet.
Yes, I saw hers. The Weather Sage was her moniker.
Yeah. And I think maybe also from the 1940s there was a set of instructions from C.C. Zane. I think that's probably a pen name. But really, that's about it as far as what I'm aware of being in print. But yes, you're right about the forecasting really based on an ingress, a cardinal ingress: Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. So that's the base chart for a season, and it's an indication. It holds general indications for the season, and especially about temperature. For example, for the season that we're in, based on the Cancer ingress, and I calculate the charts, and I do some of the writing addressed to the Northeast because it's calculated for Washington, D.C. And I try to take a look at what other signs besides the one that's on the IC for Washington, D.C. So in other words, the IC is the most important angle because it represents where all of those atmospheric forces come down to Earth.
That's the base of the chart.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But all the angles are definitely worth watching. They all resonate when especially when there's a planet close by. Let me see if I can get myself back to the chart for now.
Well, while you're
So
looking,
anyway,
let
as
me.
I was saying, or sorry
Yeah.
to say, sorry.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, okay. For DC, 29 degrees of Scorpio is at the bottom of the chart on the IC. But even just a little bit east, let's say you say that basically, say New Jersey, Eastern New York, and all of New England would be having Sagittarius on the IC. And Sagittarius being a fire sign, well, you can expect it's going to be generally warm and dry. But if it were Leo on the IC, that would be quite a bit warmer.
Mm-hmm.
And a big factor in this current season is that it started on the Cancer Ingress Day with Moon, Venus, and Mars in a fairly tight cluster in Leo and squaring Jupiter fairly closely.
Hotter than hot.
Yeah, especially with Mars. When I know whenever Mars is in Leo in the summertime, it's extra special hot. And then we got Venus thrown in there, which brings some moisture. And the moon, moon indicates moisture, but, moon's not very moist in Leo, of course. This is fire sign. But it does point towards some really big events, that big square to Jupiter. Probably a lot of your listeners remember not so long ago, just a few weeks ago, there was a lot of very heavy and localized rain in the Northeast, especially Vermont, got a lot of notice. Really bad situation. And summer in a vacation area ruined for a lot of shopkeepers. They got flooded out. So anyway, even that happened, even though they were, and they still are, in a place with Sagittarius on the IC for this season.
Now, this points out something that was really eye-opening to me. In my simplistic way of looking at things, I was thinking, okay, weather astrology, Pluto's in Capricorn, Earth changes, climate problems, and then Uranus in Taurus, so Earth problems. But the inner planets, every planet plays a role. Inner planets play a role as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and actually it's fairly easy looking at a good old ephemeris to see when some of these more potent moments are going to be shaping up. Well, right now we've got the moon in Taurus joining Jupiter and Uranus for a couple days. So, in a whole lot of ways, I anticipate a lot of really big and shocking, surprising, disruptive kinds of happenings.
That would fit.
Yeah. And we're also into the last quarter moon phase. So, in fact, I stepped outside of my door this morning and it was clear enough that, lo and behold, there was the moon. Soon after sunrise, the moon was really high up in the sky, almost overhead, because moon's in Taurus. In contrast to just a week ago when it was the full moon in Aquarius. Aquarius being a winter sign means that the moon in Aquarius is going to be really low in the sky. In fact, I looked for it. I looked for the moon during the full moon, from both the upstairs south window and from the backyard, and I could not get a clear view of the moon. I mean, part of it was low to the horizon,
Mm-hmm.
and also there's a lot of trees around here. But yeah, that's another thing I noticed. I track the moon coming south and north, every month. It's fascinating as all get out. And I was sad to see Venus disappear in the west.
So
It's gone for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Gone from
Yeah.
sight. Yeah.
Yeah, the sun is blotting her out this week. And
Yeah. But, I guess I've wandered off a little bit from talking about the basics of a chart.
I'll tell you what, this would make a really good spot for our break. So dig around and look at what you want to talk about, and everyone else just sit back and come back in a couple of, hang loose. We'll be back really soon, and we'll take our break now.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Want help with your own celestial compass? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, for Astro Insight forecasts for each week, month, and new and full moon. Want to explore the personal impact? Make a decision? Understand another person? It is possible. Click the Services tab to book a personal session with me. That address again, empowermentunlimited.net.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. ascendinghearts.com.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing
a job and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
It's a day of surprises, so we're just going to soldier on, because that's what you do when Uranus is throwing lightning bolts at you. So
and when Mars is in Virgo, you just soldier on.
I was wondering, since there have been such really intense and dramatic atmospheric events lately, wildfires in Canada that have ended up with massive smoke in the United States, wildfires in New Mexico just yesterday. Have you been tracking patterns, or have you been seeing these sorts of things showing up in charts?
Well, the short answer is yes, because I'm always looking for the astrological connections. And actually, I did write up, but I did not publish something about what I call the Canadian smoke bomb. Mm-hmm. Because where I am here near Lake Ontario, we got 2 big doses of smoke, 2 to 3 days each time. The air was really bad, and one thing I noted, I didn't manage to note the exact dates, but there was a day when Montreal had the world's worst air. And then I believe it was the day after that, the worst air was in Detroit. And then the day after that, it was in Chicago.
So it was moving east?
Moving west.
Moving west. Oh, that's right.
Yeah, the upper air. But let me see. Well, okay. Just one part of that whole Canadian wildfire story was that it started back in March, and in Canada, the official start of the fire season is the 1st of March. At that point, Mars was still in Cancer, But I mean, as I expected, once Mars got into Leo, the wildfires were going to kick up in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
So in the province of Alberta, in the west of Canada, provincial state of emergency was declared on the 6th of May. And that was just hours after the lunar eclipse in Scorpio with the sun conjunct Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
And Mercury representing wind factors and also conjunct Uranus, the great disruptor. And interestingly enough, the emergency status continued for a month, which in other words, a lunar cycle.
There are no coincidences. Okay.
No. And okay, let me see what else I can pick out here. Okay, the 5th to the 8th of June was the first of two so far periods of major impact from the smoke. This correlated with the full moon in Sagittarius, traveling sign, right? Traveling to foreign countries. And Sagittarius is at the bottom of the season chart for. No, I'm sorry. We're still looking at the Aries chart, which is where. Okay, well, yeah, right, yeah. It coincided with the full moon on the IC for the spring chart, which was still in effect for the full moon of June.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second series of smoky days were the last 3 days of June, and those followed the moon's passage across the IC again.
So, mentioning the moon makes me wonder, have you correlated eclipses if they cross? If you primarily look at weather in the United States, right? That's what your focus is.
Well, yeah, more than anywhere else. But I mean, when something pops up, or say if I'm considering, as I did last fall, what the prospects were for the winter in Ukraine. Well, I mean, I forget what I said at the time, but I think I did forecast. I think it was a Sagittarian IC for those folks over there, and from what I can gather, it was a relatively dry and warm winter. But just seeing what's happened in China and Japan and Korea just in the past week got me going back to my astro chart, which is an astro map rather, which is a map showing where all the sun, moon, and planets are rising, setting, or on the IC or MC. And lo and behold, Japan is under a Neptune line for the summer, and Saturn is on Eastern China is under a Saturn line. Saturn in Pisces, water sign, floods, deluges. So I mean, I took that a little bit further with the Beijing calculation for the chart for the quarter moon. Which one was it? It was the whatever it was. It was I remember it was the quarter moon. It was the first quarter, was it? Anyway, it showed the moon in Scorpio on the IC, and Scorpio is reliably a sign of extremes.
Mm-hmm.
It can be water. It can also be heat because Scorpio is ruled by Mars. But it points toward extremes. Yep.
So what I was wondering about is if anything has jumped out at you about eclipse paths across the U.S. and their impact on weather.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it just reminds me of the fact that just a very few days after the 2017 eclipse that crossed the country from Oregon to South Carolina, there was a really major hurricane that developed very fast in the Gulf of Mexico, called Hurricane Harvey, and it hit Houston and totally flooded the Houston region just days after the eclipse. So that's an indication that, yeah, big things are apt to happen. And Houston wasn't even on the path of totality.
No,
but
it wasn't.
It was still a partial eclipse there.
So do you see anything that leads me to this fall when the September equinox happens, and then there are 2 eclipses in October? Have you seen anything growing out of that?
Well, yeah, and I really see the energy level for weather and other kind of events ramping up here, really getting going in the next week because of the new moon next week with Venus close by, and then they're square to Jupiter and Uranus. So big stuff.
So this is talking about August. Those of you out there in Radio Land, we're talking about August. Okay.
Yep, and then just looking ahead, the very end of August, there's the full moon in Pisces, water sign, conjunct Saturn. So that certainly says to me there's going to be some very prominent stories and situations involving heavy precipitation and persistent cloud cover. Saturn, well, Saturn in weather astrology is the planet of gloom and overcast, and not necessarily precipitating, but sometimes. But we can figure, a full moon with Saturn in Pisces, it's going to be watery. And this whole 2-year period that we're in with Saturn with Neptune the whole time. Flooding. Becoming probably more of a concern, more of a crisis than wildfires.
That's interesting.
And we've got the new moon, 14th of September. You mentioned that when we were talking, in Virgo, opposite Neptune. And that's right in the time when Mercury stations retrograde opposite Saturn. And one thing that McCormick says about the Mercury-Saturn combination is a dull, damp atmosphere.
Mercury stations direct on the 15th, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe I said something
it's
different.
easy. Yeah, okay.
Yep. So in these cases where, for example, there's the moon, there's the full moon with Saturn, well, one thing that has to be noted, at least that I note, is that for the northeastern U.S., Saturn is close to the descendant. So again, it's a bit of a lightning rod indication.
Since it's on an angle.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, it's important to use all the angles, especially paying attention to when the moon is crossing an angle to indicate some kind of a significant shift in the pattern. But actually, in addition to the usual angles, I find it's really useful to use the midpoints between those angles. So it comes out to the same degree of the same mode sign. So for the summer, it comes out to 16 degrees of the cardinal signs. And what did I notice? I think it was the Vermont flooding was triggered the very day of the last quarter moon. So it was moon in Aries, but it was right on the midpoint, one of the midpoints. So yeah, it can all get complicated. But astrology is.
So if someone says, oh, gee, I wonder how I might start tracking this where I live, would you suggest that if there's like a really extraordinary day, like a monsoon hits your neighborhood, that you run a chart and just make a note of placements and then start to see if you can see correlations of every time it rains like crazy, certain planets are in water signs or something? I mean, there's a kind of a simplistic way to start to play with this.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, starting point always is having the chart for the season. I still put my charts. I still hand draw my weather charts for the season on 8.5 by 11 paper. So yeah, but the chart, and then I write in the lunations. Another thing to pay attention to that I frankly tend to neglect a bit is perigee, which is when the moon is closest to the Earth. And it just so happens that the 4th of July, the 2nd of August, and the 30th of August are the dates for the lunar perigee. But
that's when the full moon is closest to the Earth.
Well, that's a supermoon. Yeah, when the full moon happens to be at the same time as perigee.
It's a perigee. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, so I've got the lunations written in to see if any of the lunations hit any of the angles for where I am, and because I'm not too far from DC in terms of degrees of latitude and longitude, I just use that for my base chart, and then on the back I just write down the dates. I don't write down something for every day, but I always write down what the rainfall is, because I have a nice little, very simple rain gauge in the backyard. And then I try to, I do keep track of overall, like, cross-country weather conditions in terms of drought or not through the U.S. Drought Monitor website, which gets updated every either Thursday or Friday. And that's a really graphic indicator of how, at least for now, for this year, the severe and exceptional drought is gone from the west, but now the severe drought is mostly in the northeastern quadrant of the continental U.S. So it's a little bit scary looking, because a lot of it's in the Midwestern breadbasket.
Mm-hmm.
And with Jupiter hanging around with Uranus and Taurus, that to me tells me that the agricultural situation is dicey.
Mm-hmm.
And this at a time when Russia has cut off the grain flow from Russia and Ukraine, as far as I can tell.
That matches the news.
And a lot of African countries are very hungry already.
Well, Uranus and Taurus in the 30s corresponded with the Dust Bowl, so that is a recurrence right there. Which is why I thought the outer planets were going to be really big in weather astrology. I'm still grappling with the notion that everybody plays a role. I am wondering, have you looked ahead to the winter? Like, how cold is it going to be? Is it like it's going to be a really blistering one, or?
Okay, here's my Capricorn ingress chart.
You already?
No, that's the last one.
Okay.
Well, let me see if I can just quickly call it up on the computer here.
I have heard all kinds of forecasts, like it's going to be incredibly cold, or the snow is going to be pummeling everybody, or.
Well, okay, related to that, I mean, a big question is there going to be a humdinger of El Nino, or is there not?
Okay.
Oh, I should mention that, back in 2018, I gathered together some of my weather articles from my blog, and I wrote some more chapters to fill in some perceived gaps. And I put out a book. I still have a few copies left, called Scenes from a Tapestry. And the subtitle is Reports and Musings on Weather, Climate, and the Long Emergency. So it's still available. But what else was I going to look into here? Oh, I was going to look for the Capricorn ingress of 2023. Oh, looky there. Wow. Moon high in the sky for, oh, no, I'm sorry. Oh, I got to change where I got it calculated for. Yeah. Got to do those Virgo things, right?
I didn't mean to put you on the spot here. Thought you might have it.
Yeah, I haven't. I've been so caught up in some of the other nooks and crannies of my investigations. Like, I like to, when I discover, especially an old movie that really captures my attention for a while, I have to look up when it premiered. So anyway, okay. Well, once again, we have Sagittarius on the IC for the Northeast, and the moon at 0 Taurus with Jupiter and Uranus. So maybe we consider these next couple days as a bit of a preparation for the next winter. But yeah, I mean, looking at this, it's got Sagittarius on the IC and Mars down there. That doesn't look like cold to me.
No, it doesn't. Based on what you're saying.
No.
Nope. Okay.
Saturn will still be near the descendant in Pisces. So yeah, plenty of wet. And plus we have Pluto back in the last degree of Capricorn again, so deeper crisis even.
Oh boy!
Before we get on, I want to advocate for referring back on occasion, keeping in mind this rather unusual configuration that we had in May. I think it was the 20th of May, when Mars came to the opposition to Pluto at 1 degree of Aquarius, with Jupiter squaring them both at 1 degree of Taurus. I just figure that energy pattern is going to be carrying us for a while. It's going to be prominent. But then again, next year we'll have Jupiter conjunct Uranus. That's a major cycle.
Yeah.
A 13-year cycle. But interestingly, in this Capricorn chart again for 23, Venus is in Scorpio and in a tight opposition to Uranus. So that points towards some really cold and nasty storms at times, especially for points more west from, like the Midwest is going to be dealing with the Venus-Uranus, I would say.
Okay, well, all right. Everyone's just going to go hunker down right now. And you periodically put besides having the column in the Mountain Astrologer, which does come out every quarter now, you periodically put whatever is interesting you in your blog.
Yep, true. I've been doing the blog for I forget how many years, and that's called zodiacalspiral.com. And then more recently, I decided to start a Substack thing. So my address there is zodiacalspiral.substack.com. One more thing. I'm also on Instagram. I post photos that I take. Often sky and cloud photos, often garden-related photos, and often with a little bit of astrological observation. For example, during over the past weekend when we had, I guess it was the start of the weekend, moon moved from Aries from Aquarius from the full moon in Aquarius into Pisces. I lost track, although I was looking for hiding zucchinis out there in the garden. And during the time that the moon was still pretty full, but waning in the sign of Pisces, two of those zucchinis developed into baseball bat size fruits.
That quickly?
Yeah. A lot of water content being stored up.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Okay.
I use this stuff all the time.
So, and what's your handle on Instagram? Is it also?
Yeah, it's just the letter A _ TO _ Z _ astrology.
Ah.
A to Z astrology.
Okay. So it's not the Zodiacal Spiral is just the website.
No, because my beloved started it up, and her first name Aeolia, and I go by the pen name Zoidion.
Great, yeah.
Which means it's just Greek for sign.
Perfect. So keeping that going. That's wonderful.
Yep.
So people can find you any of these places, your Substack, your website, and tracking sky stuff on Instagram. That's all very good. Well, I hope this inspires some people to start thinking about the correlation between what's going on a moment-to-moment basis astrologically and the actual atmospheric conditions. I always say that astrology forecast is like a weather report, but you take it to the tangible, yes, practical experience.
Yeah, it's a real mind bender doing those quarterly things. But take a look. It should be coming out, the Libra issue coming out pretty soon. So take a look and give me a jingle if you want to tell me something.
Oh, the Mountain Astrologer issue. I actually already have mine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it is out. And it's a column towards the back called Charting the Weather.
Yeah. Yeah, I forget actually what the subtitle is this time around, but yeah, charting the weather.
Well, okay. Well,
It's
yes.
been a blast, Kathy. Thank you.
Any parting words? We have a minute. I mean, seriously, a minute. Any parting words to on anything?
Oh gosh. Well, just that our interesting time is very shortly now to get even more interesting before a little bit of a break. So yeah, the next month, watch out. Stay tuned.
Watch out, stay tuned. Keep looking up, as Jack Horkheimer used to say.
Yeah. I mean, I watch a few weather-related channels on YouTube. So yeah, there's some good stuff out there, and some of it's not too technical and involved.
Excellent.
Yeah, check it out.
I hope this gives people a grounding, and they can go to your site and they can follow your column in the Mountain Astrologer. Again, I want to thank Peter Doughty for being with us, and his website is zodiacalspiral.com, and that's also the name. If you go to Substack, they'll also find you there, right? Under Zodiacal Spiral. Well, thank you very, very much. And everybody, remember, my forecasts are at OMTimes for every month, new moon, full moon, and also at my site, empowermentunlimited.net. And I also have a weekly podcast there. And a lot of this is cross-posted on YouTube under Professional Aquarian. So enjoy the Venus and Leo energy, everybody. And just as Gene Shepard used to say, keep your knees loose, because there are a lot of surprises coming for us all. And talk to everybody again in 2 weeks. And thanks again, Peter. I really appreciate you being here.
You're welcome. Cheers, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.